Hello and welcome to Riverland Women, the podcast which celebrates the amazing achievements and inspiring stories of women across South Australia's Riverland. I'm your host, Kerry Lush from the podcast station. I'm a freelance writer, podcast host and coach, and I'm a former ABC radio broadcaster. Join me each week as we meet some of the extraordinary women who call this region home. This is Riverland Women. It would be fair to say that the first few months of motherhood probably weren't what Brittany Townsend from Berry was expecting. Her son Eddie was diagnosed with Down syndrome shortly after birth, and he spent many months in the Women's and Children's Hospital in Adelaide. But as he grew older and stronger, he began to thrive and is now a healthy 5-year-old who loves his little sister, his family, and the Wiggles. Before we explore Eddie's journey further, first let's hear a little bit more about Britt, the keen photographer and proud Riverlander.
I went away for 12 months and just decided that, the Riverland's my home and my family's here, all my family's here actually, and all my partner's family's here. So there's really been nothing to sort of take me away from here. The Riverland will always be home.
Tell me a bit about your photography. How did you get into that?
So I actually started to get an interest in photography when I started working for my mum in a clothing shop. I used to do all her photos and I just taught myself how to use the camera. When Eddie was a baby, I loved taking photos of him. And then after Shay was born, then I sort of decided to start a business doing it. So
it's a bit accidental. What had you sort of done before that? You mentioned working in your mum's clothes shop.
After I did 12 months of uni, after I left school, I started working just in retail at the surf shop here for 12 months. And then I thought I wanted to do early childhood education. So I started working in a childcare centre and studying at uni. But then uni just really wasn't for me, especially studying externally. So then I started working for mum. And I really loved it. I ran the website, did all the social media. And then after Eddie was born, we decided to shut the doors on Luca, the business, just because we just couldn't keep up with everything. And mum was ready to sort of settle down and I couldn't take over because I had a new child. So then I started up my own online business to work from home for 12 months and COVID hit. So that sort of put a pin in that. Then, we had our second daughter, Shay, and that's when I got into my photography.
Was clothing always a passion of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of that girl that dressed my friends on a night out. We all raided my wardrobe. It's definitely come from my mum. My mum's very stylish. So, I was that little girl that would wear like 4 outfits every day, twirly dresses, and then I think my sister came along with... She was like, no, I'm not wearing that. So, fashion has always been a big part of my life.
Is that something you think you might venture back into one day?
Possibly. I do love styling for photo shoots and that sort of thing. When I get my clients, they sort of email me saying, is this okay? And I would love to get a client wardrobe just so I can still have that. My finger in that pie.
Play with pretty things still. So tell us a bit about your photography business. What sort of photography do you like to do?
So mostly family and newborn. I love newborns. I've always been a real baby girl. So I love playing with the kids. I do very family-led, child-led photography. So basically we pick a location and we go on a little adventure and find sticks and flowers and rocks, and I sort of capture your journey on the way.
Are you mainly self-taught or have you done some courses along the way?
Yeah, so I have done a couple courses. So I did sort of a basic photography course and a business photography course. And the last 12 months I have done a newborn course. So that was through a girl in Sydney. Managed to snag a spot with her I think it sold out in 7 minutes or something like that. So I had to be quick, but that's been really, really good for me.
It all started from taking photos when Eddie was born. Let's talk a little bit about Eddie. Tell me about Eddie.
So Eddie is 5. He is Super, super sassy, and he knows what he wants. He was born with Down syndrome, so we found out after birth that he was born with Down syndrome. We spent 12 weeks, I think it was in the end, in hospital with him in Adelaide. We were just really lucky that he was born in Adelaide because they picked it up so quickly there. They sort of weren't sure if he would, or he had some characteristics, but they said they were 70% sure. So we were in the right place when he was born.
What was your pregnancy like with Eddie?
I had a super normal pregnancy with him. It was actually really breezy for a first pregnancy. No morning sickness. Had some scans done. They all looked fine. The one scan at 20 weeks I had done, they said I sort of had a low-lying placenta. They were about 98% sure that it was going to move out the way. Otherwise, it just would have been a C-section. But they wanted to know, so they sent me for another scan at 30 weeks. And at the 30-week scan, they said that, yep, the placenta's moved out the way, but he is tracking a little bit small. So we want to do another scan in 4 weeks. So went and did that scan at 34 weeks. And he dropped back to, I think it was the 7th percentile. So they sort of had question marks around that. They sort of said he could be a small baby, but we just want to make sure, being in the Riverland as well, we're not if there was something wrong, we weren't in the right place. So yeah, they sent us down to Adelaide for some extra testing, or extra scans, sorry. And they said, no, we want you to come back every week until 37 weeks. So 34 weeks, 35 weeks and 36 weeks we travelled to Adelaide for scans just so they could check up on him. And then 36 weeks I was induced because the placenta was just starting to deteriorate.
So all along through all these scans, they still didn't pick up that he had Down syndrome?
No, there was nothing. I think his characteristics are quite subtle. Usually the main one that they pick up at that late in your pregnancy is the flat nasal bone, which when he was born, it really wasn't that noticeable. But there is other characteristics after they're born that we actually were very news to us. Things like kids with Down syndrome can have a singular hand crease, so that's just like the line on your hand, and it goes from one side of the hand to the other, whereas if you look at your hands, you've usually got a couple and they don't go all the way across. The other thing was wide set toes, low set ears. So yeah, they were all new to us.
Yeah. So obviously you hadn't had any of the blood tests or a CVS or amniocentesis or anything along the way?
No, we had the typical 12-week scan where they compare your bloods to the scan and they measure the neck fold. That came back at 1 in 6,300 at something. And my doctor mentioned to me that we could do further testing, but being 25 years old and pretty healthy at the time, and yeah, there really was no need to pay the extra money. I think it's about $400 to get the extra scan done. So
Eddie arrived 3 weeks early. What happened then?
So he was induced at 36 and 5, and they, like I said, we were lucky we were at Women's and Children's. Once he was born, pretty straightforward birth. Once he was born, they took him to special care, which we knew was probably an option considering he was early. Then I sort of went down maybe about half an hour later, and the doctor sort of caught me and she said, "Oh, is your partner here?" And I said, "Oh no, he's just going to get lunch." She said, "Oh, okay, I'll wait for him to get back." And I thought, "Oh, that's strange. Why do they need to speak to both of us at the same time?" And when he got back, they sort of pulled us into a room, and I thought, oh, this is really weird. And her words to us were that he had a genetic abnormality. There was nothing said about Down syndrome at that time. So we still had questions about what it was, but we were very shocked, obviously. And so, yeah, for about I think it was about 5 hours, I was sort of thinking the worst, that, it was going to be something that would shorten his life and we'd never get out of hospital, and, all the medical things that go with it. So I went down by myself, actually. I think it was about 7 o'clock at night, and managed to catch a doctor down there. And I still remember he was an Irish doctor, and he'd just come back from his daughter's concert. And he said, he was so lovely, and he said to me, look, we're about 70% sure that he has Down syndrome. And I just remember feeling this wave of relief over me, because I thought, I know Down syndrome, like, we can work, like, that's not going to shorten his life. He's still going to live a happy, beautiful life. Things might be a bit harder, but I know that, we'll get out of hospital eventually. And so then he sort of started talking about the medical side of it, which I didn't know there was a medical side of Down syndrome. Over half of people with Down syndrome have heart issues. So that was a big question mark around him for the first few days. And so they had heart scans, they did eye tests, and they did some gut tests as well. All came back clear. And so I think it was 12 days later, we got sent home. So he was on full feeds. He was off his oxygen. That was one thing that he had to go on when he was born. So we headed home to the Riverland at 12 days old. Then the following day, I had a midwife come visit, and thank God she did, because as a first-time mum and a child with a disability, I didn't know what was Down syndrome, what was normal, what was just Eddie. And she sort of took one look at him and said, I thought he had a cold. And she said, no, I think we might go to the hospital just to get him checked over by a doctor. She was very calm. And I was like, oh, okay. She said, grab your stuff, because you might have to stay overnight. And I thought, oh, okay, we'll grab our stuff. And so we went to Berry, and they hooked him up to an oxygen saturations monitor, and he was at about 83%, which is extremely low. Usually you need to be above 94%. So yeah, that was huge. 3 days later, we got sent back to Adelaide. Then, from Adelaide, we were expecting to be there for a couple of weeks and come home on home oxygen. But we also found out that he was aspirating his feeds, which means when he was taking his bottle, he was getting it into his airways and lungs rather than down into his stomach. So that was also causing issues, because that can lead to pneumonia. And then it was about a week before Christmas. We woke up, we were expecting to go home. We had his feeding stuff sorted, we had his home oxygen sorted, and the doctor walked in, and it was only one doctor. And I remember thinking, this isn't good, because usually there's a team of doctors that come in, and especially when you're discharged. And then she sort of sat us down and she said, we're going to have to keep you here. His tests aren't looking good for his breathing. And he needed to be on what's called high flow oxygen. So it's a mixture of oxygen and air, which is pressurized through the nose. So kind of like a CPAP. But because he was so little, he had to have these little specks in his nose, and the air pushed through them. And basically, she said, you could be here for weeks, you could be here for months. We didn't know. So we sort of went into full panic stations. The hospital organised our accommodation for us. They organised our Centrelink for us. They organised NDIS for us. They were all over it. So we moved into Ronald McDonald House, and they were amazing. And my partner was lucky. They've got his work have an office in Adelaide, so he'd do half a week in Adelaide, and then he'd come back for half a week here in the Riverland, and he'd sort of cross my mum on the way past. So I was never alone in Adelaide. So yeah.
What was the issue with the oxygen? Why were his oxygen levels so low that the midwife picked up on it?
So he has what is called laryngotracheomalacia, which is a huge word. I'd never heard of it before, but basically it's floppy airways. So as he was breathing in, his airways were sort of collapsing in on each other. They weren't collapsing in completely, but they were collapsing in over 50%. So as he was breathing in, he wasn't getting all the breath that he needed to.
And does that improve with age?
Yeah, so that's the thing. That's why we were sort of there for such a long time, is that's really the only thing that can help is time. So Eddie was still on oxygen. Actually, we only just got the all clear in the last 2 months that he can come off oxygen completely, although he refused to wear it at 3. So it was always an issue trying to get his specs on. But yeah, it's just a time thing.
Then what was it like taking him home from hospital again? I'd imagine a bit daunting given what happened the previous time.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember saying to the pediatrician, I'm not taking him home unless you can tell me that we're going to cope at home. And he said, you're going to be perfectly fine at home. So we just had to navigate oxygen. So we'd carry around little tanks in a backpack when we'd go out, and then we had a large tank in home with like a big extension cord on it. We were lucky our house was small as well. So yeah, we sort of just carried him around on that. And then he also had, with his feeding issues, a nasogastric tube. So he was not allowed to have anything orally. So everything would go through the nasogastric tube. So then we had the issues of him pulling it out as well, as babies do. So I was taught how to reinsert it rather than having to take him all the way to Berry for a reinsertion. We just did it at home, and it was pretty simple in the end, but daunting to learn.
Yeah. How long did he have to have the feeding tube for?
He had it until just after his first birthday, but when he was about 7 months old, we started introducing pureed food, those thicker foods that they're harder to aspirate. So we started introducing them, and we're so lucky that he just loves food and has done since the very first time he tasted it. So we managed to avoid any oral aversions. A lot of kids with feeding tubes can start to be a bit scared of food because it's so different for them, but we did lots of food play. We did, dipped his dummy in food and that sort of thing, so he still managed to get tastes.
What have you learned about Down syndrome? I imagine it would have been a real baptism of fire.
Yeah, to be honest, like I said, I knew about Down syndrome, but I didn't know everything about Down syndrome. I mean, I still don't know everything about Down syndrome, but I think the best thing that happened was when Eddie was born, we sort of, people were starting to ask questions and that sort of thing. And so we ended up putting on Facebook that he was here and that he had Down syndrome. And within 10 minutes, a girl from Loxton messaged me, and she had a little boy that was 12 months older than Eddie, and he was born with Down syndrome as well. And so we connected, and she's taught me so much along the way. But also the support networks, she added me to a heap of groups on Facebook straight away. I learned a lot in hospital as well. Nurses, they had experience with kids with Down syndrome. But yeah, I guess it was a lot of my research and then just learning about Eddie.
What's been some of the tougher things about having a child with Down syndrome?
So I think the toughest thing at the moment with Eddie is his communication. He's starting to use his iPad pod, which is basically a device that is on an iPad, and he uses an app to communicate through that, and he's doing so well with it. It's been amazing to see, but he still gets frustrated when he can't communicate what he needs and we can't understand. I kind of describe it like being in a room and you can understand what everyone is saying and you're trying to talk back to them, but what's coming out of your mouth isn't quite making sense to them. And that would be I can see how frustrated he gets with it. So we just try to give him every opportunity to communicate how he wants. So he has the option of using the pod. He also knows sign. We use gestures a lot, so sometimes it looks like we're doing charades. And then in the end, if I still can't understand, I just ask him to show me and he'll take me and show me. But yeah, just eliminating that frustration for him, because his receptive language, so the way he understands, is really good. He can follow instructions. He he really understands what you're saying, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like it. He does. So that's been the toughest thing for him at the moment. Plus, I think at the start, the medical side of it as well. We're lucky we've got pretty much all clear with it now, apart from a couple minor things that are dealt with medication. But yeah, the communication and the medical side of it's been tough.
Does he have some words? What's his speech like?
So he has a lot of sounds. So if he's trying to talk to you, they'll come out sort of a bit like a babble. He's got sounds that mean words that we understand now. So he can say Bubba, which is my dad, which is what they call my dad. He can say Edda, which is his nickname, and he can say Dada. We're still working on Mum. Still, yeah, always last. But he's trying really hard, and you can see how hard he tries. So
what's expected with his speech long term? Do you think he will get to that point where he can speak more fluently?
We really don't know. I think it's something that is such a scale for kids with Down syndrome. We just try with him, and we have no expectations for him. If he wants to communicate with a different way, then we're all for that. We just want him to be able to, his voice to be able to be heard.
Is that harder in different situations, like at school or kindy and social situations, to sort of be able to let people know how he does communicate?
Yeah, absolutely. We're lucky we've got an amazing speechy. She is a huge advocate for him, and she has gone into the school and she set us up with the pod, and she supports the people around us as well. And she is a big advocate for communication. Doesn't always need to be verbal as well. Eddie's voice at the moment is his pod, his iPad. That's what it is, and that's what we need to use. And that's been such a huge blessing for him to be able to say what he wants. His favourite thing to say on the moment is why, as any typical 5-year-old. So, and also food.
You talked about the tough things, but what have been some of the highlights and the unexpected joys?
I think with Eddie being my first, he definitely shaped the way that I parent now for Shay as well. We celebrate hard in our house. A lot of things have taken him a while to get to, and he, we really have to show him the steps along the way. So with walking, it was all about, pulling himself up, and then it was all about getting his feet right and balance, and we really have to do like small steps along the way. And as soon as he'd hit one of those small steps, we'd just celebrate so hard. So I think that that's definitely been one of the best things, that it's really shaped me as a parent to see the joy in those little things. After we had Shay, just seeing the way he is with as a big brother, he's so caring and he just loves her. He goes up to her in the morning, gives her a cuddle, and yeah, I think he's a very loving person. I think people with Down syndrome, one of the typical things is they're always happy, which is not right. They have a range of feelings and emotions, but Eddie is a loving person. He'll give you a cuddle and he'll tell you he loves you, and he signs he loves you, gives you lots of kisses and that sort of thing. But he still does, he obviously has his moments like any child.
How was it then when Shay came along? I imagine it would have been quite something to think about how you were going to navigate parenting two children, with one with special needs.
Yeah, so when Shay came along, we actually decided to wait a little bit longer to have Shay. I wanted to wait until Eddie was walking. So that was a big thing because I didn't want to have to carry him as well as be pregnant. So after he started walking, we fell pregnant pretty quickly. And then when she was born, we kind of took our roles. Ben sort of took care of Eddie a lot, and I took care of Shay a lot because I was feeding her, and she was every 2 hours she'd need to feed. And so we definitely sort of divided and conquered. But now we're like, if we ever have a third, we're stuffed because
there's only two of you.
But yeah, so now that Shay's been a lot more independent, sort of after those first few months, it was fairly easy transition. I guess with most people say the transition from 1 to 2 is the hardest. And so luckily Eddie was home with me too, so we did a lot of stuff at home while they were getting used to each other. And yeah, since having Shay, I have been surprised at how things have come to her. You know, she just got up and started walking one day, and I remember feeling excited for her, but also I was like, we worked so hard for Eddie to be able to do that, and she just pops up and does it. And I think that was the realization that I had, was that he does have to work so hard for these things. The first time Shay said mama was beautiful, but it was bittersweet, because I was like, I really want to hear that from Eddie. But, you know, a sign at the moment for mum is what I need. So, yeah.
How do Eddie and Shay get along? You know, is one bossier than the other, or what's life at home like with them?
Yeah, Shay's definitely got her thumb on Eddie. She will do anything for him, and I think he's slowly working that out, which is pretty funny to see. Before, like, I'll say, Eddie, can you go get your drink bottle? And before I've even finished my sentence, Shay is off getting his drink bottle. So she mothers him a lot, which she does with a lot of other kids as well, which is in her nature, and I think that's probably also come from me. And like I said, Eddie's starting to work out now that if he waits a couple extra seconds, she'll go and do it for him. But their relationship together is just the best thing. Like, nothing can prepare you for seeing your two kids together playing. And last night we were doing yoga together, and I was just watching, and they were cracking up laughing, and there's just nothing better in that moment.
So aside from you and your family, she's going to be his biggest advocate through life, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that she'll be, once she's at school, she'll be there telling everyone what to be doing. And
And how does Eddie go at school, you know, socially? Has he got a good little group of mates? Does he get along with others?
Yeah, so he's at a wonderful school. It's only a little school, and he went to kindy there as well. So they have been absolutely amazing for him. The kids that he went to kindy with, he came across to the school with, so they all know him. They understand his signs, and yeah, they try and help him. This morning when I dropped him off, there was a little girl came straight up to him, let's go play, and so he took her hand and they went to the playground. And yeah, it's just been amazing. The kids in the class just want to help him. We're lucky we've got one-on-one support for him as well at the school, so he just loves his SSOs there as well, and his teachers.
You mentioned about NDIS earlier, so has that been a bit of a minefield for you?
Yeah, it was a lot to get my head around to start with. I was lucky I had my friend in Loxton, Jennifer. She helped me with a lot, and she still does. I'll message her and say, what do I do? And she knows all about it. So yeah, it was a lot to get my head around. But we're just so lucky we have it. Sometimes it can be a fight to, you know, advocate, and a constant advocating. But, you know, we're really lucky to have it and get what we need from it.
March 21 is a special day in your calendar. Can you tell me a bit about what happens on this day and why?
So the 21st of March every year is known as World Down Syndrome Day. So basically families, communities around the world wear their crazy socks, and it's celebrated on the 21st of the 3rd because of the 3 21st chromosomes, so the trisomy, and that's what Down syndrome is, 3 21st chromosomes. And the reason we wear our crazy socks is because those chromosomes, when you look at them, they kind of look a little bit like socks. So yeah, that's what we're doing today, is we're all wearing our crazy socks.
It's to raise awareness, I guess, but is there some fundraising involved in it as well?
Yeah, you can do fundraising through organisations. We have previously, this year we decided not to, just because we've got so much going on. But yeah, we will be celebrating hard, wearing our crazy socks. We just like to celebrate Eddie and all that he's achieved, and it's a really nice day to do that and celebrate all our kids with Down syndrome.
You've talked about the support that you've had along the way, and I've noticed just recently you're now stepping up to help other families. Tell me a bit about what you're doing within the Berry community.
We have started an initiative called River Families First, and it's through Our Town Berry, which is an amazing organisation. And basically the concept of it is to connect families and inform families and support families in the Berry community. So we're creating a resource which is going to be really cool, and basically you'll be able to jump on to, at the moment it will be a website, and you'll be able to jump on and it will have everything from playgroups to activities to a playground guide, then plus also information for parents as well. And it's all community driven. So basically we listen to what the community wants and then we go and we do it.
Okay. So it's in its early stages now. Where do you think that'll sort of grow to?
So I'm contracted for 12 months to basically grow it. At the moment, I'm just doing Berry, but it would be amazing if we could do it across the Riverland.
Britt, you're an amazing advocate for both your children. Thank you for sharing your story on Riverland Women.
Thank you so much for having me, Kerry.
That was Brittany Townsend from Berry. You can find her photography business on Instagram. You can also check out the podcast station and Riverland Women while you're there. Thank you for listening to Riverland Women.